So as I said, we'll be looking at Joshua chapter 1 and verse 8. And while you guys are turning over there, we're going to start with a story. So when I was in high school, I didn't really feel challenged through most of it. I kind of keep myself awake in class. I would do Sudokus. I know my aunt probably grimaces at hearing that. But I would have to do things to make sure I kept myself awake and engaged that way. But that all really changed when I was forcibly encouraged to take advanced placement biology my senior year. And so the point of AP classes, they're to help set you up for college and to also take a specific test that gives you college credits. So the AP biology exam is worth 4 college credits. And that's a lot of money when you think about it for college-wise. So yeah, I really wanted to take it and pass that test. And I finally felt challenged in a class that challenged me. It wasn't one that I had to do a lot of external study in, but I enjoyed sciences, so I got to handle it pretty easily and enjoy going through it. And then we get closer to when the exam actually is, and my teacher hands us some mock questions, essay questions. That's how the exams go. There's multiple choice and then exams, questions for that. And I finally realized I wasn't quite as clever as I thought I was. And I didn't do well on those questions, so that put some fear into me of, am I actually going to be able to take this test and pass it? She went out and told us as well, this test specifically is one of the 5 hardest AP exams, that a majority of students don't pass this one. So again, my fear level is rising. And then she tells us, if you want to pass, you need to spend these next few weeks doing nothing but studying for this exam. Focus all your time and devotion on this exam. And that's what I did. I spent all of my time for the next about 2 weeks focusing on this test. To the point of, I was working at McDonald's at the time, I would have my textbook and put it under the drive-thru register, and when I didn't have any cards, I'd pull it out and start reading through it continuing to focus on each section by section, making sure I knew what I was doing before I moved on so I could maximize my knowledge for this. Then test day comes. I take it, and I still feel like I failed. That was how hard this was. I felt prepared, and I still felt like I failed. And then about 2 months later, we get the results back. And of the 15 of us that took it, only 3 of us passed. I happened to be one of those 3. I felt so excited and so much just success that I devoted so much time to this test. And I passed. And just this goal of moving forward with that felt great. So why was I, a student who had basically no study habits previously, why was I able to pass this test when some of these other students who've been taking the AP exams for their entire high school career couldn't? Well, let's read Joshua 1:8, and we might get an answer as to why that is. Joshua 1, verse 8. The book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and you will have success. So remember what I said I did. I studied for 2 weeks, pretty much doing nothing but this. I focused on it day and night. I took my book and my notes everywhere I went, even to the point of work. I was keeping it close to my heart. And the result? I found success. And the same is found and it should be applied for us in our spiritual walk. So we're going to take the next few minutes really kind of breaking down this verse and applying it and bringing it into our lives this morning. And when we get to this, I found that there's really 3 questions that we ask out of this: a when question, a how question, and a why question. So let's begin with the when. As you see, it's up there. When do we need to keep the law close to us? Well, we see here it says to meditate on it day and night. So day and night. That really signifies us meditating on it always. Not just taking a brief period of the day to think about something and kind of pushing it to the back. We're chugging over it and thinking about it constantly throughout the day. How are we applying what I read this morning or any part of the day to my walk today? How am I applying what we heard on Sunday or in class in the sermons to my walk this week? How am I taking what I learned Wednesday as my recharge? How am I applying that to the rest of my week? You're thinking about it over and over again. And we can see there's a couple of really great examples of when we do take it and hold it in our heart like that and when we don't. Turn over to 2 Kings chapter 18. 2 Kings chapter 18. And for those of you who do not know this yet, Hezekiah is probably my favorite king. He came over so much adversity for him as a young man coming into this. His father, Ahaz, was not a good king at all. He was a man who sacrificed his children to foreign gods. He went in and he stripped God's temple of all the gold and silver and took all of the utensils out and shipped it all to Assyria to appease a tribute. He brought in all these foreign gods, shut down the temple, and told the nation, you are going to worship these gods because these are your gods now. 16 years of that, of this brainwashing towards these other gods and leaving Jehovah. And Hezekiah comes in and says, no, we're going back. We're going to start in verse 3. And he, Hezekiah, did right in the sight of the Lord, according to all that his father David had done. He removed the high places and broke down the sacred pillars and cut down the Asherim. He also broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had made. For until those days, the sons of Israel burned incense to it, and it was called Neshutan. And he trusted in the Lord, the God of Israel, so that after him there was none like him among all the kings of Judah, nor among those who were before him. For he clung to the Lord, and he did not depart from him, but kept his commandments, which the Lord had commanded Moses. We see that Hezekiah comes in and says, enough is enough. We're going to turn around and turn our lives back to God. And Hezekiah prospers because of this. He just has some really strong adversity that comes in. At one point, the nation of Assyria sends 180,000 soldiers, trained soldiers, to Jerusalem to siege it. And they send a letter out to Hezekiah. In it, they're ripping apart Hezekiah. They're ripping apart the nation of Judah. And they're ripping apart and tearing down God. And Hezekiah, he feels awful and so upset and distraught about this letter. How dare they besmirch the name of God? And he takes it to the temple and lays it out before him and says, look at this. Look at what these heathens say about you and about your people. Will you do something about this? And God, through Isaiah, comes and says, yes, I'll take care of this. And that night, the entire army is wiped out. 180,000 soldiers of the most feared army and militia group up until this point in time in history. They're so brutal and just evil and fear-bringing, and they're wiped out immediately. Or when Hezekiah falls deathly ill, he's on his deathbed. In fact, God sent Isaiah to him and says, get your house in order because you're going to die. And Hezekiah turns over in his bed and prays to God, saying, remember me, remember your servant Hezekiah, all the things I've done for you in your name, all the wonderful things, please, I don't want to die. And God, while Isaiah hasn't even gone out of the house yet, God tells him, go back and tell him, I hear your prayer, I hear your pleas, I'm going to need 15 more years. Because he kept his life close to God and kept the word close to his heart, he succeeds. And then we go over to 2 Kings 21. We see a king there who was the complete opposite of Hezekiah. In fact, this is his son, Manasseh. And we remember Manasseh as the worst, probably the worst, most evil king Judah ever had. Not only did he do the things that his grandfather did, but more, and for even longer. And we're going to begin in verse 2 there. He did evil in the sight of the Lord, according to all the abominations of the nations, whom the Lord disposed before the sons of Israel. For he rebuilt the high places, which Hezekiah, his father, had destroyed. And he erected altars for Baal, and made an Asherim, as Ahab, the king of Israel, had done. And he worshipped all of the hosts of heaven, and served them. He built altars in the house of the Lord, of which the Lord had said, in Jerusalem I will put my name. For he built altars to all of the hosts of heaven in the two courts of the house of the Lord, and he made his sons pass through the fire. That means he sacrificed his own children to foreign gods, human sacrifice. He practiced witchcraft and used divination. He dealt with mediums and spiritists. He did much evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger. And then he set the carved image of the Asherim that he had made in the house, of which the Lord had said to David and to his son Solomon, "In this house and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen from all the tribes of Israel, I will put my name forever. And I will not make the feet of Israel wander any more from the land which I gave to their fathers. If only they will observe to do according to all that I have commanded them, and according to all the law that my servant Moses commanded them." But they did not listen. And Manasseh seduced them all to evil, more than any of the nations whom the Lord had destroyed before the sons of Israel. So evil. He took all these people, this 25 years that Hezekiah spent bringing them back to God. He tears them away from it. And Manasseh does not prosper. In fact, Manasseh is physically and literally dragged out of the nation of Judah by chains through a ring in his nose and is taken to Babylon and left there to rot in prison until he turns his life back around to God and asks for forgiveness, and he's brought back. But we don't remember it for that. We remember all the evil that he did and how he spent his whole life just away from God and did not prosper from that. We can see that when you act not in this manner of keeping the law in your heart, you don't succeed. And we see that back in Joshua 1:8, it says, so that you be careful to do according to all is written on it. May be careful. It signifies an act of thinking and reflection on our actions. Is what we're doing, what we're saying, the way we're walking, is that in accordance to what God has asked us to do or to be? We can even see, when you go back to Deuteronomy chapter 17, God had made provisions and laws for the kings that existed. It's just interesting to know that came all way before the kings even were thought to be put in. God had said, and no, well, you guys will have kings. You will have people that you want to rule over you in my stead. And here's how they need to rule and reign. Why would he give them that, though? It's because whoever's leading God's people, and emphasis on this, God's people, not his people, not the king's people, but God's people. He's stating here that the man who's on the throne needs to make sure and remember that there's a greater king. And that leader needs to be doing and making decisions in accordance to how the king says to do it. That's why he has the law with him constantly and next to the throne. And that's the when question. What about the how? How do we keep the law close to us? Well, we meditate on it. Meditate. To think deeply or carefully about, to plan mentally or consider. It's not just a quick read or a quick thought through, but it's going over it multiple times. It's just milling it over and over again. You're looking deeper, and you're really sifting and panning for the gold that's in the Word. And we can see in the Psalms what the psalmists reflect with that too. In Psalms chapter 1 and verse 2 and 3, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. He will be like a tree firmly planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in its seasons, and its leaf does not wither. And whatever he does, he prospers. Or in Psalm 19 and verse 14, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. When we meditate on the word, it shows devotion and a deep level of building and wanting to build your faith and relationship with God. And really the only way to know somebody is to study them. You got to take the time to find out what their goals, their personality, their desires, and their struggles. I mean, look, we have literally thousands and thousands of biographies on individuals throughout life. You want to know anything about George Washington? There's thousands of references for that and thousands of ways to find out who exactly George Washington was, what his thoughts, his goals, his desires, his dreams, how he led, all sorts of information. You can find that about any people like this. In fact, you can even go to the opposite spectrum. You want to know what Hitler was like? There's thousands of books about Hitler and the Nazis. We record these things because we want to know what these people think, how they act, and what they thought. And that's the same God has done with us. He's given us a way to get to know him and his son, to realize his goals, his desires, his personalities. All of that is there for us to see and to read. His word shows us everything about that. Why would we not want to keep that close to us? And it says, shall not depart from our mouth. It's really obvious when something is in your heart and you just love it. It's going to come out in you. It's going to be this, you can't stop it. It comes out in every conversation. People know that is about you. When they see you, they can say, that's a child of God, and that's a Christian. When I was a little kid, between kindergarten and second grade, that was dinosaurs for me. You could come and see and ask me anything about dinosaurs, and I'd be able to tell you everything about dinosaurs. Even when I was in second grade, the teacher did a quarter on that. She came to me to get pronunciations on names. That's how deeply ingrained in this I was. And it's still a part of me. I can still remember how to pronounce most of those names. Could still give you a lot of facts about a lot of these dinosaurs. It was so important to me back then. It's just ingrained and in there. And that is how we need to be about God and about the Word. And the psalmist said in Psalm 19 and 14, you read it up there, and it repeats almost similarly in Matthew 15 and verse 18 when Jesus says, but the things that proceed out of the mouth, they come from the heart, and those defile the man. When we keep the law in our heart, it just shows who we are and what we're about. And when we do it, we get closer to God, and we become like God's actions and heart. And this is also the most foundational step in what our theme for the year is becoming more like Christ. You can't become more like Christ unless you're keeping this and trying to make your life so much more like Him. That's foundational for that. And then why? Why would we want to keep the law close to us? Well, we read the last section of that verse. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have success. That final statement of for, it's so important. That for signifies, again, a cause and effect. When we read the first half of that first section, I will pick up right with that but. But you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according that all is written for it. For, so we've read the cause. For, then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have success. When we do the first 2/3 of that verse, then the last third will occur. We're going to find success. And what's interesting about that statement, too, is it's a two-part phrase. That first part, it's man-oriented. When we keep the law close to us and make it a part of our walk in our lives, we're going to be prospered and blessed. And that second part, that's God-oriented. There's a promise there when He says that we will have. We're going to have success in what? Well, it's going to be in keeping with God and His plans and His walks. We're going to find success in our walk when we keep the law close to us. Isn't that what we really want? And remember the context of where this book of Joshua is taking place with. The people are finishing out the 40 years of wandering. They've been wandering for 40 years because the first covenant, the previous generation of the first covenant, well, they failed. And they didn't trust and put faith in a God. And so He says, all right, we'll try it again. And He tells them, you're going to keep the law close to us in this. And you can see that throughout Deuteronomy 28, when you read verses 15 through the end of it. You can see all of God's promises of what happens when you keep the law close to you and when you don't, all the curses and things that come with it. And when we choose not to keep His word near our hearts, we're going to struggle just like they did. In fact, when you look at verse 4 of Joshua chapter 1, it says, from the wilderness and this Lebanon, even as far as the great river and the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, as far as the great sea, toward the setting of the sun, will be your territory. That's everything He's promised. That is a huge tract of land. That is a massive area. He's promised that if you guys keep the commandments, keep the covenant, and keep close to me, all of this will be yours. But they don't do it. They begin on a great foot and going off, but they don't succeed. They don't stay with it. They don't get all of that. They only get a portion. And you've got to know it breaks God's heart to know that I've promised you all these things. I want to take care of you. I want to give you all these awesome things, but you're just not staying with me here. He wants to bless us. He wants to give us all these things. We just can't stay with it. But that's not who we need to be or want to be. So how does this really apply to us? Well, let's go back and look at these questions again. Let's look at the word you. We see that it repeats. Breck mentioned the commonality of praise earlier. We see that same commonality theme, similar to it, at least in this verse, with you. I'm going to read the verse again, but think and listen for that word you. The book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do all that is according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous. Then you will have success. This verse is directly applying to Joshua, but it also applies to the people that are there. He's giving instructions to them, saying, keep the law, and all these things will happen. And it applies to us. When we keep all these things, we prosper. So when do we need to keep the word of our heart in our lives? Well, that's all the time. You read in 1 Peter 3:15, it says, always be ready to give a defense. How else can we always be ready to give a defense unless we have taken the word and we've internalized it, we've brought it onto our hearts and into our lives and reflecting out of us? And we see the how. He tells us to meditate, to focus, and to study on the word. And then in the why. Why? Well, we want to succeed. And when to succeed and to really focus and meditate on all of that, you've got to take time to study the word. It is not the job of the elders or the deacons, of the preachers, of the Bible class teachers to do the studying for you. It is not their job to do that. We need to make sure that we are bringing ourselves and learning ourselves to the word and to the throne. Because the only way for us to really know who God is, it's to go back to the word and to read and learn. Bring it and make it a part of our lives. And he wants us to succeed. He tells us, when you do this, you're going to succeed in all of this. And we're going to get closer to him in all of this. But why do we really struggle with doing this? That's the real big question out of this, is why do we struggle doing this? Why would we not want and be able to keep the word on our hearts? I mean, to be fair, it could be that it's just not really interesting all the time. I would really like to get a poll of who finds the sections about all the numbers and numbering of the peoples, or all the crazy genealogies that are given with all those really hard to pronounce names of so-and-so begot so-and-so and so forth. Those just really aren't interesting to us. Those lists, they don't appeal to us. But unless you really studied the word and knew this, would you know that in both the genealogies given about Christ, they both show going back to David and going back to Adam? But those aren't the same people. The Matthew list talks about Jesus' earthly father, Joseph. But the Luke list talks about Mary and how she's tied back to there. Both those books are written to two different audiences, but yet they both show and prove that Christ comes from that lineage and that promise was made and fulfilled. How else would we know that unless we've taken time to study something that we generally kind of gloss over? All right, well, so maybe it's just not that it's not interesting to you. Maybe you find a lot of interest in these stories and things. Maybe it's that we get distracted pretty easily. I mean, that happens pretty frequently. I know that anytime when I was younger, I used to sit down and say, all right, I'm going to study this. And I'd open it up, and I would start reading, going through things, and start going, and then I'd hear something else happening on the other side of the house that piqued my interest, like something was showing on TV, or, hey, it's dinner time, or friends texted and said, hey, let's hang out. I got distracted by that. Or when the kids, fall and hurt themselves or something, and you're now not able to finish that study out with that. Well, the football game is on. You just want to go catch the score, and then 2 hours later, you realize you forgot to come back, and it's too late in the evening to really sit down and process anything because you got to be up for work that next morning. Well, maybe you just don't feel like you have a lot of time to do that. Well, here's a good example for this is when I used to commute to downtown on the train, I would take that 30 minutes and read my Bible. But yeah, most of you don't take the DART train. That's expected and understood. But when you're in your car, maybe turn off the radio, or turn off your favorite Spotify playlist, and maybe listen to an audiobook of the Bible. Or did you know that somebody has taken the time to record the Bible and have put it onto Spotify? There's Spotify playlists of nothing but reading of the Bible. You could take that 30 or 45 minutes that you have sitting in the car and listen to the book of Matthew or listen to the book of Esther and process through. Or you can even go back and listen to the same chapter over and over on loop to really think and process about what you're reading and studying. Well, maybe you don't feel like you understand or really know how to study the Bible. And I'm going to be honest with you here too. Until last year, I really did not know how to study the Bible. I knew that I could just read it and I maybe be able to get something off the top and get a lot of great things that you can just get off the top of reading. But I didn't know how to delve into the Word and look and find the things that were there that really apply and bring life to myself. But that all changed because I started asking questions. And I started reading and digging for myself. And I was given a couple of really good books on how to study the Bible. And then from there, I continued to ask more questions and get answers. Ask more questions, get answers. And I found so much joy in the discovery that was there. As I go through, I started finding ways that things apply to all over the Bible. I found an example in Timothy that ties back to the 10 Commandments. I never would have found something like that if I had not been shown and given instructions and taken the time to dig down into the Word and bring it and make it a part of my life. This is not something we can just go over quickly. It takes time. I remember reading a quote in a book that said a man who's truly considered an expert on the Bible, an expert on things. A student asked him, how many times do you read a verse to really internalize this and make it yours? He says, probably over 300 times. He sits down and reads that verse and thinks about it and processes over it 300 times. And that comes from somebody who's a professor who's dedicated their life to knowing the Word. Now, I know we don't have the time to do that, but we can go over it at least a few times to really process through what's there. Well, Ricky's been taking the past few months to talk to us about interpreting the Scriptures and how to set ourselves up for success in knowing and tackling all these tough issues. And these sermons have been so important on how we are to truly fairly study the Bible, and thank you so very much for bringing those to us. Because it really opens our eyes to a lot of things, I think. It opened my eyes to really remembering, hey, I got to go back and do this and dig in. How else can I fairly bring knowledge and assessment to what we're talking about? And we use this word. It opens up and brings our lives to true fruition and shows what the real writing on our hearts is and where our hearts really are at. And we do this by applying what we've learned this morning from Joshua and bringing it into our daily walk, and our daily life and study. Thank you for listening and being so attentive.